The Creation, a poem by James Weldon Johnson. And God stepped out on space. And he looked around and said, I'm lonely. I'll make me a world. And as far as the eyes of God could see, the darkness covered everything, blacker than the 100 midnights down in the cypress swamps. Then God smiled, and the lights broke. And the darkness rolled up on one side. And the light stood still, shining on the other. And God said, that's good. Then God reached out and took the lights in his hands. And he rolled the lights around in his hands until he made the sun. And he set the sun ablazing in the heavens. And the light that was left from making the sun, God gathered it up in a shining ball and flung it against the darkness, spangling the night and the moon and the stars. Then down between the darkness of the light, he hurled the world. And God said, that's good. Then God himself stepped down. And the sun was on his right hand, and the moon was on his left. The stars were clustered above his head, and the earth was under his feet. And God walked, and where he trod, his footsteps hollowed the valleys out and boughs of the mountains. Then he stopped and looked and saw that the earth was hot and burned, so God stepped over the edge of the world, and he spat out 7 seas. He batted his eyes, and the lightning flashed. He clapped his hands, and the thunder roared. And the waters above him, the ground gave. Then the cooling waters came down. Then the green grass sprouted out, and the little red flowers blossomed. Then the pine trees pointed his fingers to the sky, and the oak spread out his arms. The lakes cuddled down in the hollows of the ground, and the rivers ran down to the sea. And God smiled again, and the rainbows appeared, and he curled itself around his shoulders. Then God raised his arms, and he waved his hands over the seas and over the land. And he said, bring forth, bring forth. And the quicker than God could drop his hands, fishes and fowls, and beasts and birds swam the rivers and the seas, roamed the forests and the woods, and he split the air with his wings. And God said, that's good. Then God walked around, and God looked around on all that he had made. He looked at his sun, he looked at his moon, and he looked at his little stars. He looked on his world with all his living things. And God said, I'm lonely still. Then God sat down on the side of the hills where he could think. By a deep, wide river, he sat down with his head in his hands. God thought and thought till he thought, I'll make me a man. Up from the bed of the river, God scooped the clay, and by the bank of the river, he kneeled down. And there, the great God Almighty, who lit the sun and fixed in the skies, who flung the stars in the most far corner of the night, who rounded the earth in the middle of his hands, this great God, like a mammy bending over her baby, kneeled down in the dust, toiling over the lump of clay, till he shaped it in his own image. Then into it he blew the breath of life, and a man became a living soul. Yes, yes. I was in the spirit of the Lord that day, and I heard behind him me a loud voice as of the trumpet saying, I am the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, the beginning and the end, who is, who was, and who is to come, for I am he who lives in the dead. And then I looked around again, and I heard the voices of so many angels around them, the throne of the living creatures and the elders, and the number of them was 10,000 times 10,000, up 10,000, with the loud voices saying, worthy is the Lamb. And I say unto you, on this joyous day that the Lord has made, and that is to love your brother, respect your mother, and teach your sister how to be a lady. Happy Resurrection Day. The creation.